All right, guys, we are live on air. Very special episode today, Roads to Liberty. We have our awesome Feen guest today. We have Mr. Lousander Feen. What's up, buddy?
Hey, hey, hey. Thanks for having me, Randall. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have a Feen on. We're just getting all the logistics squared away for the studio and whatnot.
You know, if
Um,
you have one phenom each week, you could probably finish out the year with them.
I would do that actually if that's something that we could coordinate. I'm all the way down for that. I'll take a whole cast.
Yeah. Well, the
You
Feens
guys,
is it's kind of like Amway. When you become a guest host on there or co-host, then you have to bring two more fiends on with you.
that's cool. Well, it's all about the downstream. You got to work your downstream. So we got a pretty jam-packed lineup of topics today, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'll talk about. Let's like do the rundown kind of thing, and then we'll drill into a topic. Sound good? You're muted, brother. It's
Yeah.
all good. I guess that's
Sounds
good then.
wormy.
Okay, wormy, wormy. So we're going to talk about some things. My topic is voting. That's my the thorn in my side a little bit right now. We're going to talk about Lou's topic that he's really onto right now is like kind of the myth of the state and like the value that people think can be derived from the state, and kind of turning down that the state really doesn't have any usefulness. Also, I'm really big on the police aggression right now. I spent about an hour or two of my day just posting everywhere, and I actually posted on a cop page from a police department that tased somebody innocently on the side of a road in Florida. Post on their county page, just calling them out. I don't care. We got some unicorn chasers for everybody, so you don't get too bogged down by the terrors and horrors of the state. And then we're also going to get into a little bit of history for you on the origins of the state, which Lou was wise to point out would be good for the audience to have today as well. So, without any further ado, we're going to get into voting a little bit. Voting is square.
Four corners, brother. Four corners.
Yeah, L7.
Yeah. If you look at voting under the current incarnation of the U.S. government, it's been going on for 235 years now. And if voting was going to provide something useful, I think it might have done it in that time.
Right, and I guess there's like this incrementalist sort of approach that people kind of take where they're like, well, it's just a matter of time and it's a process and it has its ebbs and flows. But, I mean, what would you say to that, Lou?
Over 235 years has gotten progressively worse. I here's the thing. When it comes to voting, you're asking people to vote against their own interests, which is not human nature. Human nature is to do things that benefit you, to think of your own selfish or self-interest, first. And it's a very good survival mechanism, but when you try to use voting to get good government or limited government or one of those other unicorns, then you're asking old people to vote against Social Security and Medicare. You're asking for cops to vote for less cop funds and less prisons. You're asking corporate CEOs and employees of those companies to vote for fewer subsidies and fewer privileges. Essentially, you're asking everybody to vote against themselves. And if you're going to come up with this new voting block called status against the state, I guess maybe you could do that, but I don't see it as being a real option.
Right, well, I think that's kind of what the Libertarian Party is sort of about, right? Sort of status against the state in a way, right?
Yeah, and look how they do. They can't even get elected dog catcher.
Right, but to play devil's advocate or statist advocate a little bit here, to kind of pose the counterpoint, I think someone like Ian Freeman might argue that, well, we've elected a lot of liberty-minded candidates in this jurisdiction or that jurisdiction or in this area or that area, and we've actually passed X, Y, and Z law that's created more freedom or less taxes. I mean, I disagree with that premise, but I want to know what your thoughts are.
Ask him about the Bearcat in Concord. I know that's a low blow, but tell me about how you guys stopped the Bearcat.
Yeah, it's kind of a red herring in a sense because there could be a Bearcat and still have some sort of liberty in a sense, but it's not conclusive, but it's also not excluding. Like I think the argument that I would put out there would be to say that um, what you said in the first place, which was the fact that like you're asking police to vote against their own interests, you're asking teachers to vote in their own. Like, if they vote for this candidate, they're going to get a raise. If they vote for that candidate, they're going to get their funds cut and they're going to possibly face a layoff. Who are they going to vote for? Even if the guy that's going to give them their job or give them better pay also wants to bomb kids all over around the world, they're still going to be like, well, I kind of need to buy that new car or, put that addition onto my house, you know?
Or I want my pension. Now, I like Detroit because they probably have Bearcats, but they can't put gas in them and they can't keep them running.
Well, there was something I think passed by Bush, if I'm not mistaken, that was to the effect of like allowing, or no, it might even be before Bush, it might have been Clinton, but it was to the effect of allowing military surplus to be used in domestic police departments. It like opened that channel.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that can of worms got opened, but it's been around for a long time. It may have been going on during Clinton. I know it was going on during W.
W.
Yeah. America.
America. So, on the other side of the voting topic is the question of whether, not just, okay, has it worked or does it increase liberty or freedom? That's a really great line of arguing, but like people will talk about defensive voting, or what about the notion of forgetting voting for a second, but even the notion of politics, period. Like, do you think there is a value to people running for office just as a publicity stunt, like Ron Paul in a sense?
I'm not going to say that it's completely useless, but Ron Paul won over a lot of converts and got a lot of good ideas out there, but none of them have been implemented. So it's kind of like saying it was a moral victory, or saying if the Lions had not let those 20 touchdowns go, they'd have won that game. And the results on it aren't very good.
I like the other one. If voting did anything, they wouldn't let us do it.
Exactly. But here's something else. Let's say you do the defensive voting, and let's say you're voting to not have an increase in police funding because you don't think that they should have Bearcats pointed at you like they're doing in Ferguson, Missouri right now. Let's say that you're voting against tyranny, which is an admirable thing. If you win, do you expect the other side to abide by the results of the vote?
Right, and it's not only that, but I feel like what it might be worse is the fact that you're kind of playing into their system. So by you saying, okay, now my guy's in office, now you have to play by my rules, now that's you conceding that when their guy's in office, you have to adhere to the tyranny that they want to put forth on you. I don't want it to be a give and take of aggression. I want it to be leave one another alone of liberty. It's like I want to use this baseball bat to do surgery on you. It's just not the right tool for the job. Maybe that's not the best analogy, but I'm trying to think of a better way to phrase it, possibly.
The nightstick instead of a baseball bat. Yeah, politics is basically people imposing their will upon others. You could call it defensive and saying, well, I voted for this guy to leave me alone and bother somebody else. Somebody's got to get bothered. No, nobody has to be bothered. Let people live their lives. And you see this all the time. It's like the conservatives are currently under fire from the IRS, the Tea Party types, and everything else. But not so long ago, they were cheering that Acorn was getting lambasted. And I agree. Acorn was a bunch of tax eaters. They were sucking up taxpayer money or tax cattle money, I should say, and they were, using it to grow government. But the Tea Party, they're using the tax cattle money to grow government too, because most of them, at least the ones I've met, they love the police, they love the military, they love the people they're going to kick down their door when they don't sign up for Obamacare. So how about if nobody gets their door kicked down?
Yeah, and it's also the inconsistency. So like, so basically, like, they don't want a lot of, whether you're on the left or the right, the voters want the funding for what they want for their interest group. So they don't see the hypocrisy in it. They don't see that, it's both sides in a tug of war. It's not a matter of justice or freedom or peace or liberty. It's just a matter of, all right, well, we're winning right now, so we get to push you around now, and then when you win, you get to push us back. Like, I don't know. Inherently, I just see the bigger picture of it. I just see two mobs trying to push one another back and forth.
Yeah, and that's the best way to explain it. Is everybody's taking turns kicking each other in the junk.
Right. I think there's a name for that. I think that's called Rochambeau.
I don't know.
Rochambeau is like a version of rock paper scissors, but instead of rock paper scissors, you just kick each other in the nuts, and whoever can not stand up loses. So like if I kick you, if I go first, I kick you in the nuts, and if you can't get up, I win. But if you can get up, then you get a chance to kick me in the nuts, and back and forth. That's basically what the state and voting kind of really comes down to in a way.
Yeah, that sounds pretty stupid. Uh, I go back to the Frederick Douglass quote: "When you attach a shackle to your neighbor's ankle,
I don't know.
don't be surprised if the other end is attached to your neck."
I got a comment in the chat here from Linda. She goes, speaking of taxes, I just got a job. I claim 3 dependents, so they'll take less taxes on my check. Is there anything else I can do to avoid paying any more taxes than absolutely necessary? Linda, I don't think that whether you claim 3 dependents, 1 dependent, or 9 dependents, it makes a difference on what they're going to take from you. I'm not a tax consultant, and this does not constitute official tax advice. However, I think that's just kind of a upfront accounting, and then at the end of the day, they're going to. But your question was, is there anything else I can do to avoid paying more taxes than absolutely necessary? What I would recommend is, depending on your job, try to find a job that you can do in the black market as opposed to in the white market. So if you're doing childcare at a nursery, for example, be an independent childcare provider and work for cash. Or if you, if you're a doctor or a nurse, that may not be as feasible for you. But that would be my advice. Lou, do you have anything for her?
Yeah, the 3 dependents just determines how much they're going to take out each week or every 2 weeks. The best thing you can do is find as many silly write-offs as you can get. Well, not silly ones, because that puts a bullseye on your forehead and says, hey, audit me. But get as many legitimate write-offs as you can, legitimate by their standards.
That's a good one, too. And I'm sorry, that was Lydia, not Linda, just for her sake to clarify that. So back to voting, though. If anybody wants to chime in the chat as well as to their stance on voting or any topics that you feel like we're not coming up with. But the thing is with voting for me, too, is like I feel like it's sending the wrong message. So when these election periods come by, we should be abstaining. We should be protesting the vote. We should be protesting the election. We should be forming barricades on streets, like human barricades. And not, I'm not advocating stuff that if you feel that something is against your better judgment or is going to put you in harm's way, don't do that. I'm saying if you're already an activist and you're already doing activism in these ways, we should be, as a group, not saying, let's get our liberty candidate in office. That's, I think, the statist lizard brain, the reptilian statist brain saying, but a little voting might help, or a little bit of the state is good. No. And that's going to lead us into our other topic, which is kind of, is a little bit of the state okay? Do you want a teaspoon of it? Do you want a gram of it? How much state is good for you? Like a little bit?
There's something that I want to cover before we move into that. There's a story, well, a couple stories I want to tell. First one is, let's say you're down at the political party meeting, maybe it's the Tea Party or Campaign for a Tiny Bit More Liberty or the Democratic Club, whatever it is, and you're talking about strategies. And everybody's trying to figure out what the solution's going to be. And then all of a sudden, somebody gets the original bright idea and says, hey, I know, let's vote them all out. Or they'll say something equally stupid like, hey, let's get back to the Constitution. And people will be like, yeah, that's a great idea, like they'd never heard of it before. And that gets repeated all the time. And essentially people are doing the same thing over and over again. And the second story I want to tell is there's a young mother, and she's baking a ham, and she's got her young daughter helping her out. And she cuts off a piece of the ham from the end, throws it in the baking dish, and then fires the whole thing in the oven. And the little girl says, Mom, why'd you do the ham like that? And the mother says, well, I've always done it this way. And the daughter says, yeah, but why have you always done it that way? And she says, well, that's the way that my mother did it. That's how she taught me to do it. And the little girl kept nagging away because she's a young little girl, and that's what they do. So finally, the young mother calls her mom and says, "Hey, why do you always cut the end off the ham and throw it in the baking dish?" And she says, "Well, that's how my mother did it." So the young mother calls grandmother and says, "Hey, why did you do this?" And she says, "Well, that's the way that my mother always did it." So finally, she calls her great grandmother and says, "Great grandma, why do you always cut the end off the ham and throw it in the baking dish before you put it in the oven?" And she says, well, I never had a baking dish that was large enough for the whole ham. So do you see how that precedent got started? Do you see how that pattern got started off of something so silly, this superstition, I guess you could call it, of cutting the end off of the ham?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and it goes for several generations.
yeah. I think that's a template that's played out in a lot of different stories or different avenues in life. Like the one that comes to mind, and I'll plug Liberty Geek with Chuck, which is usually the show that follows this show at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voluntary Virtues Network. But tonight he will be doing some personal matters that have to be attended to, so he will not be available for the broadcast. We might go a little late into his slot. But the thing that comes to my mind, which is video games, when you had the 8-bit, systems like Nintendo and all that, the screen was the game. And then now there's things that are up the screen that fly onto the screen, and you could turn and see, and the world of 3D games. And so, but it was a while before programmers or developers said, let me try to use the technology in a new way. And I think that kind of what we're proposing as voluntarists is that we can use the technology of um, human organization in another way, the technology of civilization in another way, and say that we can actually find self-order as a means of organizing groups. Does that make any sense? Self-order as a way of organizing groups?
Yeah. It, if you look at most of our interactions with each other, for the most part, most of our interpersonal interactions are devoid of government. You don't have some bureaucrat standing over you at all times, and outside of different rules and regulations that affect the products that you use, we mostly live a government-free life. So to be completely without government, not a bad thing, and it's not like it's not doable.
Right. The other side of the coin too is like I would pose that we kind of are without government. I mean, government is just a fictitious agreement between a bunch of statists. I mean, I'm without government other than when it's imposed upon me, you know?
Yeah. Now let's get into this concept of limited government, and this is one of my favorite questions. If you believe that government is good and necessary, and dare I even say essential to your survival, why would you ever limit or restrain it? Why would you want government involved in some things but want it completely out of everything else? Why is that?
It's a tough one. I mean, I think that there is a sense to which moderation can be good. I mean, if I have a cigarette, it's enjoyable, but if I were to take a teaspoonful of pure nicotine and to consume that, I would die, But I mean, and like for example, like penicillin, I mean, but these are chemical things. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not a one-to-one, really.
Well, a tiny amount of government can kill you too.
Right. Give an example of that so that we know what you're coming from.
Oh, let's say a traffic stop, and you have the same first and last name as somebody else, but your middle name is different, and your social security number is different, but the cop sees Randall Parker, and he just says, "Oh, okay, so you have a warrant out for your arrest," and you try to explain to him, and you deny vehemently, and you try to get through to him that you're not the Randall Parker he's looking for, and that becomes resisting arrest, and necessary force is applied.
Yeah,
I just read a story about something like that happening in Ferguson in 2009.
right. I was gonna say that sounds fucking really familiar. I think there was a guy, yeah, it was pulled over. He had the same first and last name, but he didn't have the middle name, and he was explaining it to the cop, and I forget how everything transpired, but I just heard about this recently.
I saw the article earlier today. He got taken in, and they kept him even though they should have cleared him, and they beat the living shit out of him,
Mm-hmm.
gave
Mm-hmm.
him a concussion.
Right. Now you reminded me. So what happened was is they put him in a cell with someone else.
A
That
one-man
was
cell.
It was supposed to be a one-man cell without a cot or anything for him to sleep in, and he was complaining about the fact that he was not even being given proper. This isn't a gulag in Russia. We feel that in America, even the prison, like there was this meme, I guess, going around in my day when I was in college and I was around people that were getting arrested, and I myself, spent the night in the slammer a couple times just for skateboarding and stupid stuff like that. But you know, um, I remember this notion that, well, even in America, like prisons are like Club Med. maybe in a handful of places here or there for white collar crimes, but not really. Cops, I was thrown against the wall actually. A cop threw me into a wall. That's a whole other story. But let me tell you something. That guy got his ass kicked because he was complaining that he didn't have a bed to sleep in when he was wrongfully arrested. He didn't even get his day in court. So we don't have a justice system in America. We have an injustice system.
Yeah, yeah. But getting back to this limited government thing, there are a lot of people that say, well, the government should only do what's in the Constitution. And a lot of, I hate to say this, but a lot of these Constitution humpers, they've never read the full Constitution. They've read the Bill of Rights, they've read Article 1, Section 8, and they may have glossed over some other obscure thing, but they haven't actually read the whole thing. And when you look at all the weasel words that are in there, it basically authorizes the people that call themselves the government to do just about anything that they please. You start looking at general welfare, necessary and proper, and all that other crap. It's basically a license to steal.
Right, but so I don't want to get into roads because we've done that enough on this show. But what are the costs like defense? That's an easy one. But what do you think of the linchpins in the statist mind to like the necessity of the state? Like where is that minarchist stickiness taking place?
I do want to talk about roads because this is how I got over the roads, and this is before I even considered voluntarism or anything else. I was out in the front yard, and I'm trying to figure out what the rightful purpose of government was. I'm thinking, should they be doing roads? And I'm looking at the street in front of my house, and I'm trying to figure out, well, I don't really want to have to come home from a day's work and go and break out all that concrete and then lay fresh concrete because, I don't have the time, I don't have the know-how or any of this other stuff. I really don't want to mess with this. And I looked over to my left, and one of my neighbors was having a driveway put in by a private contractor, and I says, oh, okay, I'll call that guy. Roads, solved.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you don't see like any of the congressmen or senators or bureaucratic people rolling their sleeves up to lay down roads or to go out and protect the country. It's your children, it's men and women, it's American people. And when I say American, I mean people from this geographic area that is commonly known as America for the convenience of conversation. But it's not that the government's doing it. It's just being subcontracted out.
Well, it's being subcontracted out to private companies, and I'm sure that you'll generally find a connection between the company that's contracted and the politicians that are doing the contracting. But it's not like government took their own money and said, okay, let there be roads. No. They stole a bunch of money through taxation, and they paid somebody a whole bunch of money to lay down an interstate pothole system, and it needed to be fixed a couple of years later because it was done pretty lousy.
Right.
The whole thing about it is, and I've said this before, I'm willing to pretend that the Constitution can grant authority. It can't, but I'm willing to pretend that it can. What I refuse to pretend is that the Constitution can grant capability to do these things.
Right. Yeah. So the parchment can open the access of authority to parties based on this mutual agreement. Not the social contract per se, but the idea that there are enough people that are going to go along with it, so it'll kind of unfold. But it doesn't by any means guarantee the results. So like if the part of the document says this will ensure peace and liberty, no, it will not. It will just grant authority, possibly. Like you're willing to give it that, and I think that's smart because that it's granting itself authority. It's not the document, but it's the lie. It's the lie that people agreed to.
Right, and people didn't even agree to it. And essentially, the Constitutional Convention was what, 50-some people that got together, illegally threw out the Articles of Confederation, drew up a new thing, and quite frankly, I think that it was probably drawn up before, or at least most of it. And then they went back to other small groups of people in the state capitals, and they had ratifying committees, and it wasn't something that the people had agreed upon. Matter of fact, the only place that was put to a vote of the general voting public was Rhode Island, and they defeated it 11-1.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah, the Constitution has never had so much popularity as it does today. It was regarded as the vulture's nose under the tent.
Well, I think
If you,
I think that goes back to the indoctrination that we receive in public schools because we're built in with this folklore about how the state is so majestic and my country 'tis of thee and all this majestic bullshit, and at the same time, all the foundational shit is a lie. Like we didn't have a Thanksgiving pilgrimage festival with Indians. We slaughtered them and we stole Manhattan for $28 worth of beads.
what do you mean we?
Thank you for correcting me. I have to put $5 in the tip jar for that.
Yeah, you got to put money in the we jar. I know, unless you're on a
Yeah.
merry-go-round, you don't say we. We.
My friend goes, "What do you got? A mouse in your pocket or something?"
Yeah,
We.
yeah, we didn't do any of that stuff.
Right.
Unless like Doug Stanhope says, "Oh yeah, we got drunk and we woke up over in France, liberating them from the Nazis."
Yeah. Or
So
this is my favorite we one. Well, if we didn't go over to Germany and kick the Nazis' ass, we'd all be speaking German right now. That's a great one.
ehrlich, wer hat es gedacht?
Ja, das ist gut, Mann. Was geht?
Ah, du kannst auch ja.
Kleine, ein kleiner
Okay,
Bitte.
well, yeah, okay. So yeah, I guess that argument's out the window. But yeah, that argument is out the Fenster. But yeah, Hitler was going to come over to America, just like he crossed the English Channel and invaded England, right?
Right, and that didn't happen. So
Exactly. So since we're talking about mythology, let's go to the origins of the state.
great.
What you have to look at is there's beliefs in what the state is, and the state can be anything from benevolent provider and protector, which a lot of people believe that it is, or it can just be a straight up mafia crime organization, which I believe it is, and I'm sure that you do too. So I guess I can say that we agree on that.
Yes, you can.
If you go to the benevolent protector part, and you go with the Hobbesian cartoon, essentially humans have wicked hearts, and without somebody to control us, we would all be killing each other and raping and pillaging and plundering and all this other stuff. So government was created, obviously by all these evil people because they wanted to stop being evil, right?
Who wants to stop being evil? Status?
No, everybody, because humans have an evil heart. So,
Not my experience. Actually, I'm from New Jersey. This is a little side tangent. I'm from New Jersey, and nothing against New Jersey. Actually, I'm really proud in a lot of ways of the culture and the kind of aggressive attitude. I don't mean aggression in like the violence on property rights sense. I mean aggression like being proactive in your life, like not being lazy, not being stagnating, like being high energy and being effective. That's a type of aggression. I use the word aggression in two ways, so that's just me. But I appreciate that. But traveling, going to Michigan, going to Florida, going to where I'm at now, New Mexico, going to Colorado, I found that in many places the people are just so friendly. Like they could be playing a song on a guitar, and you're walking down the street, and they're like, "Oh, come on over and sing with us." And like they just hang out with you, and they're like, "Oh, you're leaving?" Like they don't want you to leave. Like it's like people just want to make friends all over the place. Like I don't think people have that. That's the status. Yeah. Well, there's so much bad people in the world. I'd love it to be just a voluntarist society if I could, but people are just evil. So
yeah, but the Hobbesian notion is that everybody will be plundering and pillaging without government. So people created government to bring order to things. Well, if people are naturally evil, if they're naturally violent, then there's only one way that government could survive, and that would be if they were more violent than the violent evil people that they are trying to control. Right?
you lost me, brother. Say it again.
Okay. If people are evil and violent by nature, the only way that government could control them would be if government was more violent and more evil.
I mean, that would stand to logic or stand to reason, but at the same point in time, I think the contrarian would just say no, because government can defeat evil by being more good. I don't know how they would defend that, but they would say that.
Yeah. There's one of your unicorns right there.
It's majestic, bro. It's so majestic.
Yeah, yeah. They kill people with kindness, and they stop evil with hugs and everything else. No,
Real quick. I'm sorry. Side thing. There is a project that Nima mentioned on Jeff Berwick's Anarchast that I was watching earlier today that I looked up to find out more about. I want to just throw in there real quick because you may not have heard of this, and this is crazy. There's a project that started in 2006 under George Bush that authorizes or it's underway, I guess, to where there's a basically an orbiting space satellite that deploys tungsten rods as big as a school bus that can land within 15 minutes notice at anywhere pretty much in the globe and basically decimate an entire village with like a nuclear type, because the impact of that would be akin to like a meteor strike. Have you heard of that? Is that something you heard
no,
about?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Oh.
I haven't seen that episode either. But I'll go check it out after this show.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
So
Hobbes.
the Hobbesian notion, it takes a stretch to logically agree with it, but there are a lot of people out there that agree with it, and in particular, there's this lady that I was bickering with for a while. She's one of these Tea Party people, and her response was that, well, without government, what would happen to the women and children?
What?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What does that even mean? That's incoherent to me.
Well, the plunder, the pillage, the rape, the murder, and everything else. And I asked her if she had heard of democide, and she hadn't.
Right. Describe that, or define that rather, for the audience in case.
Democide means death by government, and that's a name that was coined by R.J. Rummel out at University of Hawaii, I believe it was. And he documented the death by government in the 20th century alone and outside of war. The Soviet Union has estimates of 60 million murders of their own citizens outside of war in just the 20th century to make socialism work.
How many?
60 million, 60.
Okay.
That means the gulags, the purges, the forced starvation in Ukraine and all those other places.
Okay, so that was just for the effort of socialism. That wasn't just government democide. Period.
Well, I'd say most of it was to make socialism work.
Okay.
And what was it? Yuri Maltsov was doing a lecture, and he was talking about how some former KGB bigwig or something like that was asked about about all the executions, and they said 60 million. He says, that number sounds a little bit high. Let me go check it out. I guess he came back a week or two later and says, well, we could only verify 43 million.
So they can't even keep track of their own theft.
Well, theft of life. But Mao's China has an estimate of 80 million. Pol Pot was 4 million. And the total number for the 20th century worldwide, I believe the estimate has been brought up to 283 million.
Yeah, I heard 200 million plus, and that's pretty conceivable considering if I'm not mistaken, the United States military has accounted for at least by most estimates, I think I heard 500,000 to 1 million Iraqis since 9/11.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you look at war, and it's even tougher to get the war numbers, and surprisingly, I believe that the war numbers are significantly lower than the regular democide numbers. But you're looking at probably about 400 million people that were snuffed out with nuclear weapons, firebombing of Dresden and Tokyo, and all these other places. 400 million. That's close to 500 million.
I just want to stop real quick. I'm sorry, man. Stupid YouTube thing won't let me. I can't type an actual link into the damn chat box. So for Lydia, just email me at rj@futuremediamgmt.com. Mary George, Mary Thomas. rj@futuremediamgmt.com. That's my marketing business that I do. She's a web developer, and she wants to avoid paying taxes. I say, great, I'll pay you in Bitcoin. Message me. Let's go to work. I do websites. So anyway, you want to keep going on the myth? Let's nail down the origin of the state a little bit better. I don't think we really.
Okay, that's one possible origin. The other possibility, and I lean towards this one, is that it started out as robbers, looters, and plunderers and pillagers. But and this is a mafia model. And in the early mafia model, it was just a straight up slave master model. But it went into the how could I put it? The mafia business model of, in order to avoid rebellions and revolts and getting snuffed out, they would go and provide some services. So just like the modern day mafia has front businesses for money laundering, the government mafia has front businesses to cover up their violence laundering. So they might lay some road down. They might have police that catch a purse snatcher or a rapist every once in a while. But ultimately, the job of police is to control the population, to make sure that they pay their taxes, pay their revenue, make sure that they don't get uppity and get out of line, make sure they
Right.
don't protest too much.
Right. I want to make a plea real quick. If you're watching this podcast or video cast or whatever, and you have a situation where you can be effective in this way, please do. Encourage everyone you know not to become cops. Like, if you know someone who is a cop, encourage them to not be a cop. Like, I can't tell you how many people I know in the liberty movement, so to speak, quote unquote, or just in my own social circles who are verbally down with the stuff I talk about. Like, I don't have people in my life who are heavily statist. I just don't. Like, my mom, dad, my sister, even them, they're challenging their views. I'm not saying that they've crossed over yet, but there's an extent to which some people will not be reached, and I don't have those people in my life. But you're being lazy as a voluntarist. I feel like if you're friends with the police officer and you're like, yeah, well, my friend's a cool cop. No, he's not. No, he's not. Cool cops give bad cops a good name, and that's a problem.
I like that. Well, if they're good cops, they should have absolutely no problem crossing the thin blue line and get rid of the bad ones.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just a little public service announcement.
Yeah. So if government is instituted to protect life and liberty and everything else, then how do you explain the 400 million people killed in the last century in and out of war by government?
Well, yeah, and I mean the equation is so fucking retarded in the sense that how many people died in 9/11? 2,000 people, let's say, rounded off. How
I
many
think it
people
was
died? How
I
many
think it's
people?
3,000.
3,000. I don't mean to minimize even one life. I'm not saying that any one life's lost is in some way insignificant. I'm just saying when you talk about orders of magnitude, if it's 3,000 or 3,200, it doesn't make a difference because almost did it again. The United States military, whoever, and the coalition of aggressive forces thereby has gone around the world, and not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, but in Africa, I don't even know exactly the extent of it, obviously, but the United States military, in defense, so to speak, of 9/11, has already gone out and massacred probably close to 1 million human souls. So does that justify the loss of 3,000 somehow? Does that make it better? Does that bring them back?
Well, what about all the people that were killed that had absolutely zero to do with 9/11? Absolutely zero. The only thing that they had in common with the people that perpetrated 9/11 was they may have been on planet Earth at the time that it happened. If you
I'd
look
love
at these
to.
small if you look at these small children, they're dying in drone strikes right now. A lot of them weren't even born yet on 9/11.
Not to mention the fact that in Afghanistan and no, was it Afghanistan? Yeah, I believe in Afghanistan there is known to be some of the worst biological destruction of a population. I'm not sure if it was Afghanistan or Iraq, but somewhere in the war
Iraq.
torn. Was it Iraq? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Fallujah, I believe it was. That's where the depleted uranium was used.
right, yeah. So essentially, the United States military bills themselves out as a peacekeeping organization, like spreading democracy and promoting freedom and liberty around the world.
Spreading the state.
This I want to
That's
just jump into.
democracy.
I want to jump into a little side thing real quick that we didn't talk about. What's your take on flags, man? I really hate the people that are calling themselves libertarians or voluntarists and they still rock the American flag like it's somehow like you can't take that back. That's a badge of aggression to me.
The Westboro anarchists say God hates flags.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know about God myself. I'm not anti-religion or pro. I think you can have your own personal spirituality like I do, or you could have one that a million other people share. It's up to you. But um, forgetting about God, I mean, just about voluntarism for a second, like, or about freedom and liberty. What benefit do we have by making a logo to fly under? I mean, my business has a logo so that people could recognize my branding somewhere, my an advertisement or something. But even that's something I don't throw around too much. It's on my
If your
letterhead. You
if your
know,
logo was found at over near dead bodies, there'd be a problem with your business.
I would if my logo was near dead bodies, it would be because we were there to find the people that did it and to put them to justice. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like, that's the thing in a free market. If Walmart decided to start dropping bombs, we wouldn't shop there. Derek Freeman points that out in his trailer to Peaceful Crime Spree or whatever it's called. What's the name of his film?
Derek J's victimless crime spree.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're here to help me on these. I get a little flustered sometimes, but anyway, let me see where we're at, man. I forgot where we're at on the show clock.
Well, let's do a little freestyle. Let's go back to my big question. If government is necessary for our survival because the plunderers and pillagers would take over without it, why would we ever want to limit government? Why would we want it restrained? And
Right,
that's
right.
that's a question people can't ask or can't answer rather.
I mean, I'm stumped too because I don't agree with the premise. I don't think that government does provide any value. So if I thought it provided some value, I would be stumped there because I'd say like, okay, well, I do want government to do roads, but I don't want government to do anything. I don't want to do thing number one or two. Fuck it. I hate the state with all my heart and soul.
Well,
Deep down.
let's take a step further. Ronald Reagan got cheered when he said government does nothing better than the private sector. And people just went wild. Yeah, Reagan, the government sucks. The next logical answer should have been, well, let's do away with government because it does nothing as well as the private sector.
I'm glad I wasn't around for that because I probably would have sunk further into statism with Reagan. I mean, I was probably alive during Reagan. I don't. When did he reign? When was his reign of terror?
He started in 81. He was inaugurated, and he left in 89.
Okay. He vacated the seat of terror in '89. So yeah, I was born in '83, so I was alive from the start to the end of his reign, or not from the start, but towards the middle to the end.
Okay, so you were probably just starting to eat jelly beans when he was getting out of office.
I love me some jelly beans, dude. How'd you
Yeah.
know?
Well, of course you have to. Yeah, Reagan was a great speaker, and if his actions matched up to his words, then he would have been completely awesome. But he raised taxes 11 times. He was a gun grabber. He socialized medicine even more than it already was when he got to the White House. So how is that conservative? Unless your version of conservatism is the liberals come up with these welfare programs and then the Republicans just conserve them and make sure that they never go away.
Yeah, so I became hyper aware of that during the 2012 election because that was the first election cycle where I was, a full voluntarist and I was watching it more as a spectator and kind of like trying to reposition the pieces in my brain of when I was a statist and saying like, remember when I used to like, okay, so full disclosure, everybody knows this who watches my show on a regular basis, but in 2008 I voted for Obama. I wasn't a very hardcore statist, but he caught me off guard, and I said, "Cool, black dude, cool, a guy that can really talk, and he seems legit." I didn't realize I had like, a Mao or whatever. But at the end of the day, I wasn't even aware of the violence of the postal service or the violence of, the DMV. I was very far into the cave in that respect in my life. So in 2012, watching the election cycle as a spectator, I was able to see some things that really caught me off guard. For example, like I felt almost as if the Democrats and Republicans were working for the same company. It's almost like the salespeople at the dealership. You have the really nice salesperson and the badass tough guy manager that comes out to try to close the deal, and then he leaves, and then you're talking to the salesperson again, and it's like, well, I'm sorry about my boss. He's a hard ass. I'm trying to get you a better discount. It's a bait and switch. It's a game. He walks up to the boss, says, "All right, I'm gonna go play him like this." The Democrats and Republicans, not that they're cohesively coordinated, like not as if this is a big racket, but deep down, I feel they know, like, all right, the Democrats are gonna raise taxes here. We're gonna use that money to act like we don't want taxes to raise money so we can start a new war or whatever. Like, does that make any sense? What I'm saying?
It makes perfect sense. And people, you have this pendulum. Um, you've got the hardcore Democrats and the hardcore Republicans. They're going to vote for their party no matter what. You have like the swing voters that basically decide everything, and their pendulum swings from getting abused by the Democrats. They get tired of the Democrats. They say, "Hey, let's get abused by the Republicans for a couple of election cycles now." And then they go back to the Democrats and whatever. It's it's just like a doomsday cult, thinking that bad government is the doomsday, and there's something that's going to come along and get rid of it. The state is religion in that it has messiahs. Christianity has promises one messiah at an unknown time, but the state promises a bunch of messiahs to come along in increments of 2, 4, 6 years, and they're going to save everything, and nothing ever changes.
Right. So okay. So the state promises you a bill of goods, and then they don't deliver, and then they beat the shit out of you and give you a crutch, and then say thank you, thank me for the crutch.
Yeah, explain the gun in the room for
uh,
everybody, because I might have a couple of my friends that aren't familiar with it that are watching.
oh, I love it. So yeah. So every law that you advocate for. So whenever you go, there ought to be a law. They shouldn't let people sit on the corner and just smoke cigarettes like that, or talk to people like that in the middle of the road. There should be a law to tell people. No, because what you're saying is, what is a law? Okay, a law is a suggestion backed by the threat of violence. So if you'd like me to do something, you could make a plea to me and say, here's why I would recommend or request you to do something. That's called a suggestion. Those are very peaceful. I like to be suggested to do things all the time. Here's a movie you might like. That's a great suggestion. A law is a suggestion where if you don't follow the suggestion, there's a threat right behind it. So, hey, Lou, why don't you go watch this great movie that I like? Okay, cool, I'll go watch it. If you don't watch it, by the way, I'm going to come over your house and point a gun at you and throw you in a cage. Okay, so people don't understand the link. Let me drill down a little bit better. Uh, Parking ticket. You got a parking ticket. The parking laws are a suggestion backed by violence. Park here and make a payment to this machine, and you can continue to not be violated, not be aggressed upon. So suppose I don't pay, I get a little notice on my windshield. That's annoying. Okay, I'll put that in my glove compartment. Continue driving. Weeks, months go by. I didn't pay. I apparently missed a court date. Whatever. I get a notice in the mail. Oh, what's this? Apparently they still remember about this silly incident months and months ago where I was taking up a little bit of space downtown and it was inconvenient for apparently somebody. Okay, well, whatever. I don't care about that. That's in the past. I'm sure that everybody who was inconvenienced is over that by now and no big deal. No, I got another notice a month later. It says here it's bold font and it's a different color paper. It says here that if I don't show up, there'll be a bench warrant out for my arrest. That's silly. They won't really arrest me over this parking ticket now. Anyway, so you keep going on with your life, and eventually what happens is you find yourself at a red light, and a cop pulls up behind you. He runs your plates just to see if he has any reason to aggress upon you. And sure enough, he finds one. Oh, you have a parking ticket from 6 months ago. Let me pull over and aggress this person. Pulls you over. You dispute it. I don't remember that. Or I'm sorry, sir. That's $30. Let me take care of that. Let me give you the $30 here. I got it in my wallet right now. Let me give you $30. Can we handle this? No. In a free market, that would never happen. But cops go, nope. I'm sorry. I have an opportunity to aggress upon you, so I'm going to just, make you get out of the car, pat you down, touch your junk, maybe tase you, and then throw you in my car and take you down to a cell and put you in there to rot away for a little while and feel like a piece of meat. So maybe I was a little graphic with that description, but hopefully that explains to people the gun in the room. It could be a parking ticket. It could be a jaywalking violation. It could be a dress code violation at a public school. Any little thing that the state has its hands on where they can find a way that you didn't do their suggestion, they will execute violence upon you, possibly to death.
Yeah, because if you do what is perfectly natural and refuse to be kidnapped, then the gun in the room comes out of the holster and goes to your head. and they will kill you in the name of the law because you parked in the wrong place, or you didn't wear your seatbelt, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it's a property tax, which is nothing more than rent on what you supposedly own. If you don't pay your property tax, they will come and they will kick you off of your property. And if you don't leave your property, they will kill you. So everything that government does is based upon violence. It's also based upon this notion that they can legitimately use violence. And that is the religion of the state. Government is the guns and the people that wield them. The states are the geographic monopolies on the use of gun pointing, but the state is the religion that legitimizes the existence of governments, states, and the violence that they bring for
Right,
your safety.
and Ben Stone, the bad Quaker, points out that I'm sorry, I just lost my thought. I hate when that happens.
That there is a difference between government and the state.
Yes, thank you. You're the best, man. So basically, Ben Stone points out that like government is the maybe the laws or the building or the parties like the Democratic Party and like the structure of government, the judicial system, the branches. That's government, and the services themselves could be considered government in a way too. But the state is the mental edifice. It's the lie. It's the collective misconception of authority. It's the granting of authority. So if I were to say to you, Lou, hey man, I'm not sure if I told you, but last week when you were away, I washed your car. So, and I know you were away, and it did rain and get muddy and everything after that, but you owe me $50, by the way, because I did wash your car while you were away. Does that sound reasonable to you?
No, it doesn't. and that's where you go to that Spooner quote that, and I'm going to botch it up a little bit, but I'll get the meaning of it. Government is actually created by the few, for the few, and operates on the assumption of consent when no consent has been given. The colonists did not consent to the Constitution. That was small groups of people, mostly banksters and lawyers, that came up with it and pushed it through and had it adopted. It's funny. There's this Constitution humper that I know that's vehemently anti-union, and he was talking about right-to-work laws here in Michigan and how he supported it. And his rationale was, well, what if you work at a place where the union got that agreement 100 years ago? 101 years ago, it was a non-union place, but 100 years ago, the union came in. You didn't get a chance to vote on it. You didn't have anything to say about it. Shouldn't you have a say on whether the shop that you work in is a union shop? And I says, yeah, I agree with you. An agreement from 100 years ago before you were born, why should you be stuck with that? What if that agreement was 235 years ago? And of course he says, oh, but that's different.
We got Kenji in the chat, who's a regular viewer of Roads to Liberty, and he's also pretty active on some of the other Voluntary Virtues shows in the chat as well. He's kind of playing a little devil's advocate, but he's also kind of pointing out, his first comment was, in order to successfully argue against government, you have to be able to argue how the market will deal with negative and positive externalities of public goods. Look, I think that's a valuable discussion to be had, and I don't mind getting into it a tiny bit here. And I asked him, I said, well, what service do you propose that the market could not provide? And he said he was taking the devil's advocate, but he would say pollution and national defense. All right, well, I'll do pollution and you do national defense. How's that sound?
We've already covered pollution.
What do you mean?
What's going on in Fallujah?
Yeah, but that's like the macho libertarian flash argument. Like I'm saying, like talking about like factories and like water.
Okay, all right, go ahead, start on it, and if you come up, if you miss something, I'll jump in because I got some ideas on it. But go ahead.
All right, yeah, we could do both together. So my thing on that is like in a statist paradigm or under government or whatever, we don't have actual justice. We don't have actual recourse to our damages. So in order for us to seek any kind of recourse, we have to petition the state. And the state has already been petitioned by a bigger bidder our bid is very small. My property tax or my sales my income tax that I can offer the state is like maybe like 20,000 a year or something. But what Monsanto or this one or that one who's polluting the government, polluting the land, can offer the state is magnitudes larger. So by taking that bribe, the state has already decided where their loyalty lies. And so my argument is that the state is actually standing in the way of us having recourse. In a free society, you'd have multiple dispute resolution organizations, and businesses would have to align with them and be accountable to contracts that pre-describe their behavior and recourses that they would accept penalties if they were to go outside those boundaries. The market would provide a better solution without a doubt. I mean, what else do you got, Lou?
Okay. And I'm going to kind of simplify what you just said. Government courts have not protected property rights. And yes, government has been the greatest polluter. If you look at the nuclear testing in New Mexico, if you look, or all over the western states, New Mexico, Nevada, all those places, you look at the depleted uranium in Fallujah. You look at the fact that the BP oil rig was at Deepwater Horizon had just received a passing grade a couple months before it went poof. Let's see now. The company in West Virginia that spilled all those chemicals into the drinking water, the EPA had not inspected them since 1991, I believe it was, but the funds were available to give them money in the stimulus. So yeah, no, government hasn't taken care of it. But let's look at what has happened from the private market. Imagine if the catalytic converter had never been converted and the politicians in California or in Mordor on the Potomac said, we want you to put catalytic converters on these cars to clean up the smog. Well, first thing that would have been said was, what the hell's a catalytic converter? It was actually a guy that lived in California and saw the smog problem and wanted to do something about it that invented the catalytic converter. So yeah, the catalytic converter is a great thing, and the maybe the regulations requiring it are theoretically a great thing, but without his inventing it, then there's no way that the regulations could have been possible. So what you have is a private market has done something, and government has jumped out and taken credit for something that it had no idea about.
This reminds me of Stefan Molyneux a little bit in a weird way, because I feel like the government is kind of like, to use an analogy, almost like a bad parent or two bad parents. Like, here's why. So like they tell you they're gonna watch out for you, they tell you they're gonna protect you and everything like that. And then what happens is, when you're really in a time of need, you're left out to dry. You mean like you're sitting there going, but the Constitution, but there ought to be a law or something. When you think the state has your back, it's like a bad parent. It's like a bad. So, and then the other thing they do is, this is, I know I'm not going to name anybody out, but I've seen this in parenting before, where as a parent, they shit on your kid. They shit on their own kids. Like they either hit their kids or they neglect their kids in some way. And then when their kid finally does something good, they get out in front of the parade and act like, oh my great son, thank God, oh God, But it's like, when I needed you, this isn't my parents, so if they're watching, don't take this as directed at you necessarily. Not in that direct of a sense anyway. But it's I think a flaw that we see in not just parenting, but in any kind of paternalism, where like, if you get a job and your boss says, oh, well, if you stay with this company for 30 years, you'll be squared away and you'll have everything you need. Take that with a grain of salt. Why do you just don't believe everything? Someone's telling you something to get you to do what they want you to do. And the state has told you, hey, don't worry about it. Just vote and just pay your taxes and we'll take care of everything. Lousander is wise to point out, how about the depleted uranium? How about the kids that are being born in Iraq with 3 arms and 6 arms? Do those people have protection from the state, or are those people a little bit kind of screwed over by the state?
Yeah, or the example of the courts. I believe this is an actual case where a factory went up, and the emissions from the factory absolutely just polluted the surrounding areas, so orchards and farms and all this other stuff. But the court said, well, because commerce is necessary, we're going to side with the factory instead of the property owners. If you had actual free market and you had private dispute resolutions, private court, whatever you want to call it, property rights would be enforced. And if not, then that court would go out of business, because nobody's going to go there to have to deal with with them.
Right. So we got Kenji. He said pollution and national. We touched pollution. Let's do national defense. Why don't you lead off with that, and I'll back you up with anything.
Okay, national defense. Yeah, I'm going to do a real quick version of what about the foreign invaders. Um, I personally think that if the United States went ANCAP and became ANCAPistan and it was no longer the United States, I personally think the rest of the world would follow in its footprints. But if, let's say, China, Russia, and all those others stayed in line, kept their governments and all this other stuff, and they're eyeballing resources here and everything else. Okay, what you have to look at is you have to look at the logistics of getting an invasion force over here to the United States, or ANCAPistan, whatever you want to call it. In order to have enough people to actually come in and invade, okay, you can use the airborne operations, which means you're going to have to put the soldiers on the equivalents of C-130s, and they're going to have to jump out. You have to have enough men to be able to take over large cities and small towns. You also have to have enough airplanes to transport them. You also have to find a way to get tanks and other heavy armored vehicles onto the ground, which means that you have to have ships to transport them. Now, realistically, there would still be Google Earth and satellites and stuff like that, and there would be private defense. But if the argument is that you have to have a state to repel a foreign invader, then how do you justify that argument when so many states have provided defense but have still been invaded and taken over? A state doesn't guarantee that a foreign invader won't come in. Just ask Iraq about that, because they've been invaded a couple times in the past 20 years. So the idea that a state can repel an invasion force is kind of nonsense. But let's take it a step further, and this goes into what should government do and what should government not do. Most people consider national defense to be the most important, the most complicated thing on earth, and that's why only government can do it. If government is capable of doing the most complicated and the most important things, then they should also be capable of doing the less complicated and the less important things, like, I don't know, running a post office efficiently, or maybe running the nation's health care.
Right. So, but the counterpoint to that would be like to say, like, okay, well, the government does, defend us properly as an American. I guess you could say that, because we haven't, this group of people, I'm not saying we as Americans, but just the people in North America haven't faced a actual attack on our homeland. I don't even count 9/11, because I'm not past the point of thinking that might have been an inside job. I'm not going to get into that whole conspiracy thing, but I'm not past the point of thinking that might be the case. I'm also agnostic to that view. I'm not on one side or the other. But what I will say is that even if that was a domestic terrorist or a real terrorism attack from an outside entity, we haven't had an actual nation affront this anybody. Let's just say there hasn't been an attack on anyone in North America or in most parts of the world. So I mean, and the biggest aggressor in the past decade would have to be the United States, right?
Oh, probably more than the past decade. You could look at 1941, December 7th, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and
yeah.
So here you have the fleet in this area that's just impossible to get out of if you have to get out of it in a quick thing. And Ben Stone talked about this on his podcast, that there was foreknowledge of a possible attack, and the modern ships were out to sea and not in Pearl Harbor at the time. But I'm a 9-year Army veteran, and as far as 9/11 goes, I'm not a truther. I believe that 19 unremarkable goat-herding schmucks without any special James Bond training faked out trillions of dollars of assets, resources, every intelligence agency.
You want to get into it? What do you say about Dick Cheney in a bunker doing an exercise about planes being hijacked on the same exact day in the morning, and having multiple Air Force divisions that would be there to scatter and to shake down a real plane that was doing something like that went off its course for more than 10 minutes? There was no intercept. What do you say about Dick Cheney in a bunker that morning doing a drill that was very much the same thing as what happened on 9/11.
I
This is
don't
not a
believe.
drill. This is not a drill. You have that actual audio coming from dispatchers at Air Force bases saying the drill is over. This is a real attack. So there was a drill that was mirroring the exact attack that exact morning. That's not a coincidence. That's
I,
weird.
I don't believe that that Dick Cheney was in the bunker early in the morning. I don't think he was in the bunker until
No, it wasn't a
after the
bunker. I'm
first plane hit.
sorry. No, when I say
No.
bunker, I mean he was in a base running a drill that morning.
I'm pretty sure he was in the White House,
Well, he was.
wasn't he?
Maybe it wasn't Dick Cheney, but there was a drill taking place. That's my point. That same morning.
That very well could be a coincidence because that's what they do is they run drills all the time. I've been on a missile site
A
where
drill of a hijacker taking over planes on the same day of 9/11.
it is not an
How
impossibility.
come? How come there's no footage of a plane hitting the Pentagon when there's over 15 cameras that are pointed at the Pentagon at any point in time? How come we've
I
never
have
seen it?
I have no freaking idea.
But isn't that
But
weird?
yeah, a
How
little
come,
bit.
how come a building has burned? How come the Sears Tower, or no? How come the World Trade Center was hit by a B-52 bomber in 1954 and burned for 18 hours straight and never came to the ground and it still stands today? How come that's the case? I don't understand that. I don't understand that.
I don't know. I can't explain all these things.
No, I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Like I said, I wouldn't be a truther because I don't know the answer. I don't know if it was Dick
All right.
Cheney or this one or that one, but we don't have to get into that anyway.
All right, here's something that we can agree upon: the Lysander Spooner version of 9/11. But whether 9/11 really be one thing or another, this much is certain: the U.S. federal government has either authorized such an attack or has been completely powerless to prevent it. Either way, it is unfit to exist.
Absolutely. No, and I'm not too bad. Like I said, I'm not a truther because I don't. If I could go into a crystal ball and see that it was what you said, it was just the rebels, the box cutters, and all that, I wouldn't go like crazy in my mind. Okay, I could believe that. I could conceive it being the official story or something close to it. The thermite, this, that, and the
Well,
third. There's a lot of
I don't believe the
questions,
official.
but
I don't believe the 9/11 report because honestly, I think they have absolutely no idea. I think they put that out to try and placate the masses.
I think that there was a few individuals, Bush, Cheney, Condoleezza, this one, that one. If you read Crossing the Rubicon by what is the guy's name? Michael Rupert. You can understand a lot about this. Dick Cheney was on the board of directors for Halliburton in 1998, and he wrote a report about how we are at peak oil as a world, and that we reached peak oil long ago, but we are not discovering new oil reserves nearly at the rate at which we are ramping up our oil consumption as a world. And he made a report about how the only way for the Western powers to establish a greater foothold in the oil-producing nations, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, and so forth, would be, I don't think it's Pakistan actually, but would be to have another cataclysmic type of aggressive attack against the United States. And he detailed that in so many words. And this isn't evidence, but this is interesting information that this man was on Halliburton. And Halliburton is the same company that went over and rebuilt much of Afghanistan after the first wave of attacks and received massive, hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars government contracts to rebuild the war-torn Iraq or Afghanistan. And this is the same. I mean, you don't think there? I mean, I just it seems all too coincidental. And then the guy that bought the World Trade Center towers, like a few years before, took out double insurance and stuff. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to get into it too much, but it wouldn't be a big surprise for me either way, is what I'm saying. If I found out the state orchestrated that, I'd be like, okay, all right, that's not that unbelievable.
I really don't think that they have the capability of orchestrating that stuff, but it is not outside the realm of possibility either way. I will mention this though. You remember that guy that hijacked the MVP's speech at the Super Bowl last year?
Remind me. It sounds familiar.
He went out there and said 9/11 was an inside job. In a post 9/11 world, that guy faked out post 9/11 security, hijacked a speech, and then asked the very people that he thinks perpetrated 9/11 to launch a new investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think it was possible that the security could have been faked out in the pre 9/11 world?
Oh, for sure. And like I said, I think either scenario is possible. I think hijackers could totally have done it because I've gone on a number of airplane trips since 9/11, and there's a level of scrutiny that's absurd to get onto an airplane. and then there's a level of scrutiny that is absurdly neglectful as well. Like they search me really good, but they don't search me that. Like if I wanted to really do something, I could have a capsule of like plastic explosives like under my tongue or something and like spit it out when I get on the plane, or like there's a million things you could probably pull off if you wanted to.
Yeah,
So
it's all
both,
security theater.
You've finished my sentence. Yeah.
The only thing it does is it stops amateur night. But and that's with everything that government does. So,
Hey, Stefan Kinsella's in the chat. Hey, Stefan Kinsella, what's up, buddy? Stefan Kinsella is a cool guy. He's a lawyer, and well, he was a lawyer for a long time. I don't know if he's still practicing. I should
I'm
know these
opposed
things.
to IP, Stefan.
Yeah, so we're both on the anti-IP side of things. So we're glad to have you here in the show chat and watching us. So we touched on a lot of these topics: voting, myth of the state, cops, the origin of the state. We had a unicorn chaser. Do you want to set that up a little bit, Lou?
Yeah. This is an article that I just recently read. It was in Fee, and I don't know if the person is a minarchist or mini-statist, I should say, or one of us. But anyway, here's it's called Unicorn Governance, and let's see, it goes, okay, but they may not immediately see why the state that they can imagine is a unicorn. So to help them, I propose what I modestly call the Munger test. Number one, go ahead, make your argument for what you want the state to do and what you want the state to be in charge of. Number two, then go back and look at your statement. Everywhere you said the state, delete that phrase and replace it with politicians I actually know running in electoral systems with voters and interest groups that actually exist. So in other words, what you have to say is, I want Nancy Pelosi in charge of this. I want John Boehner in charge of that. And number three, if you still believe your statement, then we have something to talk about. And essentially, it's people have this idea of government, maybe they see it as a benevolent protector and provider, but you have to look at the people that are in there, and you have to look at the results that have happened. Government hasn't solved a whole lot of stuff. When I was on the Feens Wednesday night, I was going over that article, problems that government solved that are forgotten or something like that, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's problems that government has created.
I like the Munger test idea because it says like the next thing it says is like the state should be like one of the things would be like the state should be in charge of hundreds of thousands of troops. Well, put that through the Munger test. George W. Bush should be in charge of hundreds of thousands of troops. Like the guy choked on a peanut and almost died, and he skipped out of a war. He had a coke problem, and now he's president. Now, I'm not saying that if you skip out on a war and have a coke problem, you shouldn't be a good person. I'm saying, look, I'm just saying, do you want that guy to run 200,000 guys with guns and send them anywhere to do anything? No.
More like a couple million.
Right. Yeah, I don't know why it says 200,000, but hundreds of thousands it says. So, yeah, I must have just said. Okay. So this is pretty cool, unicorn governance, and I think the underlying like metaphor there is the fact that unicorns don't exist, and so it's like we have this notion that we can create we can write some things down on paper, and then we can appoint some people, so to speak, in some sort of supposedly fair manner, in order to rule us, essentially. Basically, statist argument is that there is a proper way of assigning authority to rule people, and I disagree.
Yeah. Well, let's look at this whole notion of democracy, and yes, a republic is part of the democracy family. If you can't opt out, you're not free. You're not sort of free, you're not kind of free. So what you have is this giant collectivist nonsense, this monster that you must go along with what the group thinks says, or in a republic you can elect people to make your decisions for you like a good little child. And if there's something that you don't agree with, well, too damn bad. Suck it up.
Yeah, so kind of fast forwarding to a free society a little bit, when we have that, how would that look, Lou? Like if you were in violation of someone else's rights, like if I aggressed upon you in some way, what would a free market dispute resolution process look like? Do you have an idea about that?
Yeah. If somebody was breaking into my house in the middle of the night and I plugged them, I wouldn't have to call a cop and explain my actions. I'd have a private carcass removal service that would come in and take care of it for me. Who knows? They might even clean up the walls.
It sounds so macho libertarian flash to say that, but that's actually literally the truth. So if someone's in your house and they're dead and you have the gun, context is everything. So if they were a dinner guest and you have a long-standing relationship and that can be borne out through Facebook conversations and posts, you're a suspect. If you've never met that person in your life and there's no evidence ever tying you to them in any kind of correspondence or communications, you should be completely almost. What would be the means for me to invite someone into my house in the middle of the night and set it up to look like a robbery so I can kill them without
Why?
having any prior contact to them ever?
Why? And unless you're a serial killer, I really don't think that would happen a whole heck of a lot. And I think you still have crimes of passion. I
For
think
sure.
you still have jealous, abusive spouses. I think you probably still have some road rage.
Yeah, but the state doesn't
Probably
prevent
not as
that
much.
anyway.
Right.
The state doesn't remediate that anyway. If anything, the state enhances all of those problems.
Right. And the biggest excuse that people use as to why freedom can't work is pointing at the failures of statism.
I'm sorry, I'm in the chat, man. I'm sorry. I'm not used to having a chat. I want to say because I have a little bit of an audience today, and it's thanks to you, Lou, and it's thanks to Michael last week, and it's thanks to Neiman the week before. Um, we went a little late today because the Liberty Geek is unable to fill his spot today, so I'm just going to mention his name again. Normally from 9 to 9:30 p.m. on our network, you got a nice blend of how voluntarism can match up with the tech and nerdy world, and there's a lot of parallels there actually. So kind of to expand your horizons, if you have some geek roots, check out the Liberty Geek with Chuck. We have Stefan Cattell in the chat room, and we didn't have IP on the rundown tonight, but it's pretty cool that he's there. He's talking about the defensive practice of law with regards to IP, and yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of all goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about in the sense that the state will break your leg and give you a crutch and ask you for a thank you note. Same with IP. I'm trying to build a business and I want to be successful, but instead of letting me just be successful, they say, well, you have to patent this or else I'm going to let someone else be successful off of your back. Like, you have to do IP or else someone else will just take your idea and patent it, essentially. And Stefan could say if I'm wrong, but that's kind of how I understand it.
Yeah, it's kind of like defensive voting.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what happens is you wind up getting sucked into the patent system, just to defend yourself so that somebody else doesn't come along, patent the idea, and then sue you for violating their patent.
Right. And I think that the apt analogy kind of is to the mob because like the it's a protection racket. First of all, they're both protection rackets, and with the mob, it's a lot smaller scale.
The mob actually gives you protection when they offer it.
Right. Yeah. If I had to choose, I would take the mob over the state. I mean, I wouldn't want either, but if I had to pick one, I'd go with the mob. They're brutal, but you know what? If you're on their good side, it's not that bad, and if you pay them, they actually provide protection. So that's kind of, Oh, and here's another thing, real quick. You go ahead, Lou. I'll follow you up.
And they won't bother you about your little proclivities. As a matter of fact, they'll supply you the stuff that you're looking for.
I want to plug something real quick. It's called the Peacekeeper app. If you're a voluntarist or an anarchist and you don't have this, I'm loading it up right now. Here's what it looks like. Once you're in the app, this is coming out. It's already out, but the actual paid service with all the features and everything is coming out soon. They're not a sponsor or anything, but I was talking to Cody, who's the founder of this, co-founder of this project, or founder of this project, Peacekeeper. It's an app in the Apple App Store. I think it's on other apps too. This is supposed to replace cops. This is a voluntarist project or an anarchist project. You can select intruder, medical, fire, or abduction, or you can report for a neighbor if you see a break-in or if you hear some sort of issue. This doesn't go to the cops. This doesn't go to 911. This doesn't go to the police. This goes to other people in your neighborhood that have the Peacekeeper app. So if I had an intruder, if I had a fire, I'd rather just have some neighbors come by and help me out. Maybe not a fire, unfortunately, unless I had a neighbor with the hose. But if, it says abduction, intruder, medical, and you can report for neighbor. And as this grows, as this type of infrastructure grows in the free market, I think we'll replace the state. That's my hope.
Yeah, the way to get rid of the state, and Ben talked about this quite a bit on his Beyond Civil Disobedience, is you have to provide people with a better alternative. People are of the mind right now that they are, that voting isn't working. You can't depend upon the cops to protect you. You can't pretend upon or depend upon, any of these other services. And a lot of people, and particularly in Detroit, a lot of people are walking away from government, and they're doing things such as the peacekeeper.
Yeah, someone in the chat corrected me or helped me out a little bit. It's Cody Drummond, who's the founder, and it's Peacekeeper app.
Okay.
So check it out.
Nice. Yeah,
I didn't remember his full name.
People are walking away from the government because they're seeing that the government isn't doing what it promises they can do, and that it fails miserably. The next step is to get them to walk away from the state. Because a lot of people are of the mind that it's just this current government. Maybe down the road it'll be better. It won't, but maybe it will be. And once people give up on the state, the religion that legitimizes the existence of governments and states, that's when humanity can get moving forward to making real progress and real gains and much less murder, much less theft, robbery, and everything else.
Right, and I think we've kind of, I'm happy about the content in this episode because we kind of touched on a lot of things from the voting process, which has to do with actually the intake of new representatives, which supposedly the state is a representative democracy, and we're supposed to want that and think that that's valuable. So the voting process, we've shed a lot of light on the hypocrisy and inconsistencies with regards to how that system is set up. And so that's our intake valve for the engine of the state. And then we talked about the myth of the state, the usefulness of the state.
Let me say one thing about voting.
Yeah.
I know there's some statists out there right now, some Republicans that are not seeing this, and right now they're shaking their fist at Barack Obama and saying, in 2 years and 2 months when your term limited out, I'm going to vote for a new master.
Mm-hmm.
And if he treats me like garbage, I'm going to walk around his office and wave his flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're all the anti-war Democrats anyway.
The anti-Bush Democrats left. The real anti-war Democrats are still there. Like Code Pink, they're still mother effing Obama left and right. They're just not getting a whole lot of coverage.
I appreciate that because I wasn't aware of that. So I just thought they all disappeared off the face of the earth.
Was it
anarchist?
Was it Cindy Sheehan? I think her name was. Yeah, she's still riding the anti-war train. She's in the locomotive.
Brutal Werfel TV on the chat says, how many anarchists are out there? I don't think it would be enough to replace the cops in a useful way. I'm a marketing guy, and I was talking to Cody, not in a consulting or professional way, but just as a buddy and just chit-chatting. And that's a great point to raise. I think that is relevant. And we've been talking about some ideas and how that's actually going to unfold, how they're going to actually get the peacekeeper idea out. So it doesn't have to be at first just like Ron Paul. Ron Paul was like a trick move. You thought you were looking at a possible candidate, and you found out you were in school learning a lesson. The Peacekeeper app, we can sell it not as a replacement to the cops right now, but we could resell it as a better means of immediate response in your community. So how fast did the cops show up? 30 or 40 minutes when they arrive.
Yeah, when seconds count, the cop. When seconds count, the cops are only hours away.
Yeah. So peacekeeper is practical.
I think I said this about people in Detroit. A lot of people are going outside of the state, and they're not libertarians or anarchists, but they're acting like it. You don't have to be an anarchist to see something like the Peacekeeper and adopt it. It's out of self-interest and self-benefit. You say, hey, I have friends that I trust to come over here and help me if I need help. Like let's say you have an EMT that lives in the neighborhood, or somebody who has medical training, and all of a sudden you're having you're starting to feel queasy or something like that, and something's about to happen, and you can hit that medical thing on the app, and maybe he's going to get over there in time. How long is it going to take for an ambulance to get there? Maybe you call the ambulance and you hit the app and see who gets there first.
Right. And I can't speak on behalf of Peacekeeper because I'm not in any way officially related to that company at all. But I can tell you this: I spoke to Cody briefly on the phone over a little bit of time, and I can tell you this: he's aware of some of these issues that y'all are bringing up, and we appreciate the comments. Not I say we, I mean I'm sure he appreciates the comments. Because any business owner likes to know feedback about their customers, and I appreciate it as a host because we need to understand the struggle we face because it is a struggle. I mean, I don't like to get dramatic and sappy, but the fact of the matter is, we're being oppressed. When when you're pulled over, you could be the next guy that gets tased. You could be the next girl that gets violated by a police officer. There's no recourse for you. You can't go to court. You're not. Some people get that lawsuit. Again, that's just like some good cops make bad cops look good. It's the opposite of what you think. If you vote, you don't have a right to complain. It's not the other way around. Voting takes you out of. You already picked a statist, and now you can shut up. That's how I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah, what's the status logic? If you don't vote, you have no right to complain. If
Right.
you vote and your guy loses, you agree to participate, so you have no right to complain. And if your guy wins, you got exactly what you wanted, and you got it good and hard. Now shut up and stop complaining.
Or that one meme where it's like all the Occupy Wall Street people like wants more government regulation, and then it's like more government regulation. You see all the cops with like riot gear
Yeah,
on and stuff.
yeah. So yeah, when you want more government, that's what you get is the enforcers. Because without them, Obamacare couldn't be enforced, the drug laws couldn't be enforced, your taxes couldn't be enforced, nothing could be enforced. So when you think of tyranny, think of cops. They make it all possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a couple more good comments in the chat. We just don't have enough time to get to it this week. We don't have a guest host or a guest planned for next week yet, so maybe Lou might have another fiend or someone else we could refer. But either which way, we're always looking to bring you guys the most variety of perspectives in the Liberty community to where we can have these conversations and kind of share ideas and make progress. Towards ending the state and towards creating more awareness towards the violence of the state. Lou, what are your parting thoughts, my man? We got about 2 minutes left.
Parting thoughts. If you haven't registered for the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest yet, go ahead and register. It's miplc.org. That's Mike, India, Papa, Lima, Charlie. It starts next Friday at 10 a.m. and goes until Monday at noon. It's going to be a very good time, held just outside Kalamazoo, Michigan. Think of it as like a mini pork fest, but not as many presentations and stuff like that. And we will be doing an episode of the Feens live from there. So get on out, have a good time. There'll be plenty of bacon, plenty of voluntarism, and just good fun.
Sounds awesome, man. What part of the glove is it in? If this is, where are we at?
Southwest.
Oh, glove over here. I
Yeah,
went to Michigan
yeah,
last summer.
yeah.
I love it.
It's in between Detroit and Chicago.
Yeah, I will tell you guys, you go out to Michigan, if you haven't been out into that part of the country before, it's really amazing. I'm a city boy. I grew up in New Jersey, and everything's a street and a shopping center. You stand in a field or you stand on the road, and you just see flat green until the end of the world, and then you see blue. And it's just all horizon. It's just all, depending where you're at, but that's the part I was in. It was just open like that. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I think Michigan could use some mountains because we are a little bit deprived in that. So maybe we need redistribution of mountains from the government.
We have a lot here in New Mexico. If you want to borrow some, we could just
I've
trade.
I've been there,
Yeah, it's cool,
so
man. It's got
so I
its.
hated it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm only here for a month, and I plan on leaving soon because I'm a traveler. But
I was at McGregor Range, New Mexico, out in the middle
oh,
of nowhere.
you're working on the base though.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's never fun.
no.
Being
So
a hired gun for the state. So anyway, thank you, Lousander Feen, for coming on the show, man. Appreciate having you.
hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite, and I'll see if I can get some fiend interest to come on here next Friday night for you.
That would be beautiful, man. And if not, anybody in the audience, if you have a guest or even if you yourself have something you think could take up a part of an episode, even if you want to come on for 15 or 20 and share your thoughts, we can arrange that for you. We do group hangouts. Last week we had a roundtable discussion with a number of co-hosts, so that was fun. And it was on that episode as well. No, I'm sorry, that wasn't on my show. That was on a different podcast. But we will incorporate those formats as well. So That's about it, guys. Tune back in next week, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voluntary Virtues Network, youtube.com/voluntary virtues. I'm your host, Randall Parker, with guest Lousander. Say goodbye, man.
Worms.
We're going to worm it on out. Peace, guys. Thank you. Wormy worm.